Good evening, everybody. It's an absolute delight to be here with you this evening. I'm Jane Kemain from Nine Arches Press, and welcome to everybody joining us for tonight's triple launch with Jessica Mukherjee, Tanya Hirschman, and Ramona Herdman, all releasing their wonderful new poetry books. We have Still Life from Octopus by Tanya Hirschman, we have Glut by Ramona Herdman, and the wonderful Notes from Shipwreck by Jessica Mukherjee. What an incredible range of books of poetry to be launching tonight. We're really delighted. And hello to everybody who's joining us on YouTube. We can see you, so it's an absolute delight to know that you're all out there. And thank you very much for your messages and in the chat. We can very much see those. We know that there's people calling in from The Hague in the Netherlands, from Leeds, the Malverns, Whitley Bay, Wiltshire, Norfolk, Bristol, Winchcombe, London, Hebden Bridge, Rotherham, Beckenhams, North Norfolk, Ledbury, Poetry Pharmacy, West Kent. Thank you so much to all of you joining us. It's a real delight, as always, to have you as our virtual audience, joining us here around the Poetry Campfire for some more wonderful new poetry from Nine Arches Press poets. So to tell you a little bit about how this evening will work, we've got a wonderful set of readings to come. Firstly, from Tanya Hirschman. It will then be followed by Ramona Herdman and finishing with Jessica Mukherjee. In between, I'll say a few words about each of our poets as well. And please do feel free to take part in the chat on YouTube. We are having a look in there in between things as well. So it's really lovely to know that our audience is there and reacting. And the poets will see this after the event as well. So do please post comments and chat. It's really lovely to know that you're all there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first reader this evening. To tell you a little bit about Tanya Hirschman. Tanya's second poetry collection, Still Life with Octopus, was published by Nine Arches Press in July, and her debut novel, Go On, will be published by Broken Sleep Books in October. Her poetry pamphlet, How High Did She Fly, was joint winner of Live Cannon's 2019 Poetry Pamphlet Competition, and her hybrid particle physics inspired book, And What If We're Allowed to Disappear, was published by Guillemot Press in 2020. Tanya is also the author of a poetry collection, a poetry chapbook, and 3 short story collections, and co-author of the Writing Short Stories, A Writer's and Artist's Companion, from Bloomsbury. She's the co-creator of the On This Day She Twitter account, co-author of the On This Day She book from John Blake 21, and also has a PhD in creative writing inspired by particle physics. For her new book, Still Life with Octopus, a wondrous follow-up to that first collection, Terms and Conditions, it's not up in the sky where Tanya's looking, it's more down in the depths of the sea and all of the wonderful things that are found there. And what I love most about this new book is how it challenges our human-centric notions of intelligent life, urging us to better understand the intelligent life that surrounds us, the precious and unique creatures we share the earth with, like the octopus of its title. It's also a book that invites curiosity, in fact, rewards it, and seeks to find out about mind and body, not as separate mechanisms, but part of our sensuous existence and experience of being alive. If only we were more inquisitive about the daily sensations and emotions and feelings we have, the way that our minds and bodies respond to stimuli. Talking of which, I admire most in Tanya's poems is the way that they stimulate their readers, reach out a hand or indeed a tentacle, and bring us into their realm where time, the physical and metaphysical, are held in the embrace of these brilliantly observed poems. Will you please welcome Tanya Hirschman?
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much. Firstly, it's an absolute delight to be here and to take part in this triple book launch, which is something that I don't think any of the 3 of us have ever done before. And as we were discussing, this also may be the highest proportion of poets with red hair that has ever been seen at an event. So we just wanted to mention that as well, including Jane, of course. And I just wanted to spend a minute actually just to thank Jane, because I've been thinking about it, and when Jane first asked me to submit some poems for a possible collection. It was 6 years ago in 2016. And I thought she was a bit mad, actually. I thought I didn't really believe her. And then when she offered to publish my first collection, Terms and Conditions, I thought, surely this is a mistake, because I didn't think I was a poet. I was a short story writer, and I thought even up to when the book came out and afterwards, I thought people were going to point and say, these aren't poems, these are short stories, and then I'd be shunned, you know, that kind of thing, because I was just beginning to sort of mess around with words on the page and with shapes. And I don't know if it hadn't been for Jane's faith in me and her support and confidence, I don't know if I would be here today, actually calling myself a poet, and not only calling myself a poet, having the confidence to say, is that a poem? Well, if I say it is, then it is a poem. And I wanted to thank you, Jane, for everything you've done for me, for everything you do for all of us, for the poets, for the poetry community. And I also wanted to say, I really hope that you do get some time as well for your own fantastic poems. I worry that you're spending too much time on the rest of us, but we benefit greatly from it. And I don't know if without your support of me, I would have ended up with this gorgeous book with an octopus on the front and with some quite odd things inside. And I thought maybe I'd start. Some of you are perhaps curious about my obsession with octopuses. And I have had a few people ask to see the octopus tattoo that I did get in honor of the publication of this book. Here she is on my shoulder. And so I just thought I'd tell you where the obsession started, basically. And it was a couple of years ago, and it was when I read this amazing book called Other Minds, The Octopus and the Evolution of Intelligent Life by Peter Godfrey Smith. And it was one of those books when the minute I finished reading it, I started again because there was so much in it and I didn't get it all the first time, and I have read it 4 times. So when I say obsession, it is an actual obsession, and it just sparked my imagination, and it made me think, and everything that Jane was just saying about humans and other creatures and what we can learn about them and about ourselves. I mean, I think it's endless. And I wanted to, Peter Godfrey Smith, who I had the absolute delight to be on the Radio 3 program, The Verb, with him a couple of years ago, and actually got to read some of my octopus poems inspired by his book with him there on Zoom, which was a real thrill. He gave me permission to use a quote from his book as the epigraph to my book. And I just wanted to read this to you. To completely forego both skeleton and shell is an unusual evolutionary move for a creature of this size and complexity. An octopus has almost no hard parts at all. Its eyes and beak are the largest, and as a result can squeeze through a hole about the size of its eyeball and transform its body shape almost indefinitely. The evolution of cephalopods yielded, in the octopus, a body of pure possibility. I love that, body of pure possibility. I think I might have thought of stealing that as an alternative title if Still Life with Octopus hadn't lodged itself in my brain. I also wanted to say, you should all find yourself a poetry editor who not only supports your octopus obsession, but suggests extra tentacles inside the book. Thank you, Jane. So, some poems perhaps? I'll start with Still Life with Octopus 1. There is an octopus in my chest, trying to give my heart to you. She will not listen when I say I need it. I have to keep prying her from my vena cava, the pulmonary veins. I ask her what makes her think you'd want it anyway. She shakes her head, her color shifts to indicate disappointment, hope, connection. Finally, I let her take it. Once it's gone, she settles in its place, exactly the right cardiac muscle shade. I worry about where my heart is now. Did it even reach you? Let go, whispers the octopus in my chest. These things are not in your control. So I had thought I would be writing about octopuses. I hadn't thought that I would end up quite quickly, in fact, and I really should have known, given the fact that my short stories are all on the quite weird side, I'd end up with an octopus as an imaginary friend. And it's been lovely having her company, and now I have her on my shoulder. But not all the poems are with octopuses. There's about 6 or 7 Still Life with Octopus poems scattered throughout the book. and then a whole load of other things. And one of the joys of putting a collection of short things together, this is now my 8th book, which I say that and then I just want to just grin for the rest of the 15 minutes because it's quite unbelievable. But one of the joys is you don't necessarily know what it is you've been writing about until you put everything, you try and put things in some kind of order between two covers. And it's only really now that I'm seeing things and connections between poems as I'm choosing ones to read. And I think that's what I was thinking about. These are the things that were obsessing me, not just octopuses, but also thoughts, about me, about myself. And so I'll read you a couple of those poems. This is called Making New. This is new to me, this setting of a boundary new to my heart, walking dark. The night is comforting. I let go of everything I cannot see. You. I cannot see you. I let go of comforting. Everything is night, my heart a walking boundary. This new setting of me is dark. I am setting my heart new. You cannot see this dark boundary, this everything. Walking is comforting. I let go. I am comforting me. This new boundary, my heart cannot dark. Let go the night. Everything I see is new. That one I wrote when I was actually walking at night. There is a lot of walking going on in my writing life. I think so many of us find that things come when you move your body, your mind moves as well. And I have to drive today because I sat in a cafe working on a new poem and then I just couldn't get it when you get in poetry head. But generally, when you're on a walk, hopefully people can't hear you. This next poem, there are another thread running through the collection of poems that I wrote walking by the river next to my house. And obviously I did quite a lot of that over the past few years. And they ended up being so many river poems that Jane did say at one point, I think you've already said this in another poem. So we took out some of the river poems. So this is one of them that has made the cut. And it's called And Then God. And then God sends someone else's Jewish grandmother to stop me with a question about birds I can't answer. She says, as if this is her river, I've never seen you here before, then presses for my exact address. Instead of the usual, such a nice girl, no husband, she asks, no dog? I don't know why I tell her then that I'm a poet, but the gleam in her eyes warns me this is the point to leave, the unasked, dancing on the path between us. Will you make a poem out of me? And yes, I did, obviously. And I haven't seen her since. Someone else's Jewish grandmother, but if she ever stops me again, I will tell her. There was a lovely tweet about my book last week. I mean, it's all just joyous, frankly. And I'm still quite blown away by the thought that something that was in my head is now on the page and in some way connects with somebody else's head. And they shared this poem and then someone else shared this poem and it seemed to go down well. And I thought, oh, I hadn't thought that this might be one of the ones. You never really know with your own work. And it's an absolute joy especially when it's one of the ones that you think, well, maybe this is, a quieter one. So I thought I'd read this one. Middle of the night. Night asks me to wake up. What? I say. Night whispers darkly, something about cats coming in and out, a baby 5 doors down. You want company? I ask. Night nods. I get up and we make tea. Too early, the cat mutters as we pass. Night and I get back into bed. I'm fine now, Night says. And a tiny little one to follow that. I'm in charge of no one but myself. She is not always obedient. So we'll move on to another octopus poem. And this is inspired by things I have been learning about octopuses. And if I started going into all the things I've been learning about octopuses, I think it would get very boring and lengthy, and it would turn into not a triple book launch at all. So I'm aware of the time, but it's a short one. So this is Still Life with Octopus 6. Between the octopus and her arms is an agreement. Arm will wander, touch, explore, report some of its findings back, but no obligation. Each arm may keep things to itself. How it felt to stroke the metal remnant of that hull, what it found behind the furthest shell. And the body, too, has things it will never tell. So basically, without going on too long, there are neurons in the octopus's body and in each of its arms. Arms apparently is the technical term in the world of marine science. So there's no centralized brain in the octopus. That the arms have brains too, and no one really knows. The joy of this is no one really knows so much about octopuses, how autonomous each arm is and how they relate to the rest of the body. Isn't that fascinating? Feel free to, go and write this in your own way as well. I have been told since the book came out about 6 weeks ago that some people have become quite obsessed at watching octopus videos on YouTube, and I take no responsibility. Thank you. I will read a couple more short poems. So this one is on the facing page to the one I just wrote. And I wrote it at a different time, but it's clearly what thinking about octopuses and their bodies got me thinking in terms of my own. It's called I Am Interested. I am interested in myself. Sometimes I examine my hands as if they belong to someone else. I watch the fingers move, ripples of skin, the wrinkles that appear. I am interested in my limbs, the miracle of a forearm, a mole, the soft side of the neck. I cut my own hair by feeling edge and curl. I am interested in the age of me. Notice changes in my shift, my spin. I am interested in breath, in breathing, in what I lose, in all that I take in. And I will read you two more. I want to mention at that point also another fascinating book that I read called Breath by James Nestor, which is all about breathing and was an absolute revelation. So many things we don't know about how we breathe. Right, I hope everyone's writing this down. I can provide a reading list later. Right, and for my penultimate poem, I realise there's a lot of poems in here as well for the first time where the title also is the first line. Make of it what you will. This is called In the Arrangement of Salt. And in the arrangement of salt, with pepper, teapot, cup and saucer, water bottle with its curl of cucumber, glasses drunk from, menu. And in the arrangement of mother with daughter, husband and wife, dog or cat with its curl of tail, bed slept in, a house. And in the arrangement of salt, with wife, cat and daughter, saucer, husband with no curl, and the table reset, and the flowers refreshed, salt and pepper filled, and the woman before mother, wife, and the husband, teapot, cup and saucers, salt the woman, pepper her unchildren, curl the unbecoming husband, refill the dog, leave the water bottle out, sit down at the unwiped table, push your cup, lick the menu clean. You can order everything. So I will finish with one final octopus poem, which is the final octopus poem in the book. And what I love, one of the things I love, when Jane wrote the blurb for my book, she used the word joy. And when someone mentioned my book last week, they also used the word joy. And nothing makes me happier than the thought that there's joy in this book. And I would hope there would be. And so I hope it ends on a slightly more joyful note. So this is Still Life with Octopus 7. And just to say again, thank you, Jane, for making the book and giving me permission to write these poems. And thank you, Ramona and Jess, for doing this launch, the three of us. And I am so excited to hear you. And after this, I get to sit back and relax and listen. Still Life with Octopus 7. And what if the octopus could talk? And what if they turned to us and said, enough with all the jars, the tests of what we can get into and get through. You've seen what we can do. What if instead they took us in their arms, said, we've been watching too. We've seen what you get yourselves into, what you're struggling to get through. Let us help you. See your jars, your lids. Let us teach you to loosen, breathe, undo. Thank you.
A huge thank you, Tanya, for that really beautiful reading and for giving us that really vital and beautiful glimpse of a different way of living, of a different form of intelligence on our earth, which I think is just so unique and beautiful about these poems. I'm thrilled now to introduce our next reader for this evening, Ramona Herdman. To tell you a little bit about Ramona, Ramona's previous pamphlet, A Warm and Snouting Thing from the Emma Press, was shortlisted in the poetry category of the East Anglian Book Awards. Her previous pamphlet, Bottle from Happenstance, was a Poetry Book Society pamphlet choice, and one of her poems was chosen for the Poetry Archive's Worldview 2021. Another won the Poetry Society's Hamish Cannon Prize in 2017. Ramona lives in Norwich and is a committee member for Cafe Writers, and her new book, Glut, has just been published by Nine Arches Press. So we are absolutely thrilled to be publishing this brilliant new collection in August. It's always really interesting to sort of talk about really why the poems sometimes really stand out for me as an editor. And I think Glut by Ramona Herdman is a book of delights and temptations. It's about appetites as well, from whiskey to trifle, allotment harvests to cheese boards. Ramona's poems are as humorous and waspish and sharply true, and to the point of painful in their revelations sometimes, where the things we indulge reveal how we navigate and negotiate both the social rules and the rituals, whether those are at home, at work, or in our love lives. And what I love most about the poems is their incredible perceptive ability to lightly find that very moment of memory or significance in imagery. It should be said that Ramona has a delicious and utterly irresistible eye for detail. The way that cigarette ash glints across a car and on the genital folds of the gear stick, Daryl Hannah's quarter-century thighs, the sherry-soaked and possibly entirely flammable sponge of a Nigella Lawson trifle. In the glorious riot of all her specific and mouth-watering savoury details, what Ramona pins down in those pleasures, consolations, and impulses of the body are how we live intimately alongside each other, how we move between the losses and gains, and the inevitability of opening ourselves up to life and the joy that can be found in our small, delicious lives on the cooling rack. Will you please welcome Ramona Herdman?
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Jane, and thank you for believing in the book and in making the book so much better than I could on my own. You're such a wise woman, and you know so much about words. And thank you for making it such a beautiful thing as well. And Tanya, thank you for starting us off with such joy that I feel very buoyed up already by this evening of poetry. So thank you. I am going to start with the first poem in the book, which Jane suggested should be the first poem. And she said, put it first, that will make a statement, then everybody will know where you're coming from. So here we go. The center of the fucking universe. I wonder what happened to Martin. When we were young, he gave me a sea-smoothed stone, as if I loved him, as if I'd treasure it in my palm. He was only my friend's fiancé. Long gone, back to New Zealand, the dark, the other side of the world. He could even be dead now. I wonder how many acquaintances he gave such presumptuous gifts to. Is there a beach trail of stones across the world on the desks of women who half remember his conversation of pronouncements? Of course, you know, don't you? This is all about me, like everything. The stone rests on my papers, little igneous owl pellet, blip from the world's core. All this, barely a blink in its lifetime of never loving anyone. And then I feel I have to read my sunstroke poem. We haven't quite got the heat wave at the moment, but it has felt very apposite the last few days. Sunstroke. You'd have thought I'd have learnt better by now. But no, I'm still lizard bask as anyone come the year's new sun. Despite that student afternoon, lasered by light in the concrete campus square, supping one pint, then fevered and chucking up all night. Despite that, and despite the white flag of my face, my freckles-scarred arms that in latter years haven't faded back in winter, I know no better. I ought to be born again virgin white, swathed, slathered, tented. I'm not. Alongside hermeneutics, you'd think I'd have learnt my skin's limits, my poorly head's needs. Nope. I've heat-stroked often since, once even indoors in a sauna. Oh, the faints, the piteous retchlings, the cold baths, recantings. Still an idiot to my body, little white dumpling toddling out with the masses every time to prostrate myself before Apollo's hoping dazzle, to be cooked and eaten by the gods. And then this one, some people have seen it as a pandemic poem. I think I started writing it before the pandemic, but there's definitely a sort of lockdown feel to it. It's really about that idea that to be happy, you have to live in the moment. You have to live for the day and live every day as if it's your last, which in practical terms, if I would not have much to turn to, if I certainly wouldn't go to work and earn any money if it was my last day. So that is that thing, you have to balance living for now, but hopefully planning for the future a bit. The one-day plan. They say you can stand anything for a minute. That's how professionals do it. The trick is to only believe in the minute. Hood your eyes, chin down, focus on where your feet are, where your heart is this minute. The AA thing. One day, one day, one day, one day. Every day lately, we wake up and one of us suggests not drinking tonight and the other agrees. I don't know if you'd call us professionals. I'm reminded of the puzzle where one of the guards always lies and the other always tells the truth. So you choose the door they don't say. The thing though, with the one-day plan, is sometimes you can't help yourself believing in all the days afterwards, stretching like a corridor of doors. Sometimes it's the opposite trouble. If today were all there was, who'd want to waste their last evening sober? This one, I think, is kind of core to one of the main themes of the collection, which is about the distance between us and trying to understand what's going on in somebody else's mind and not really, like, not ever having to guess, basically. And it's from the Guardian Saturday magazine, has a celebrity Q&A column, of which one of the questions is something like, have you ever said I love you without meaning it? So it's a kind of meditation on that. Have you ever said I love you without meaning it? Those people who say no can't know what meaning it means, haven't been born if they've never breathed on a flicker, knowing it's going out, but even so, putting their lips together to blow. Have they never nursed love dying in its nest? Have they never tipped the struggling wasps out of a jam trap? Never had an irritable great-great-aunt or a not good enough dad trying again to do his best? Surely they must be lying even now. Who could ever even know if what you mean when you say love is what I mean. It's like the green-blue divide. Point and make a word for it, and I'll agree, because I love you. There's a few work poems in the collection. I'm just going to read one of them. And this one, I think, if you've never worked in a corporate environment, it might need a little bit of explanation. So there's this thing about bringing your whole self to work and creating a culture where people can bring their whole selves to work, which is supposed to be very inclusive and lovely, and you can be open about yourself. But yeah, it's slightly problematic in my view. Creating a culture where we can bring our whole selves to work. Years ago, hot desking one day with a team in the Birmingham office, someone said something snackily cynical, a phrase of disapprobation for the incoming CEO's vision, the planned transformation of the England portfolio. There was a shared snicker over laptops, then an in-breath as they remembered me, till Ewan said, "Oh, don't worry about Ramona. She's the Ken Clark of the policy team." Snake that I am, I cherish that still, curl round it like snake eggs I've warmed in my mouth till they glow. I can still see his face as he said it, lit up with naughtiness. And I wonder if he meant it, what his game plan was there, his tactics, what he was really thinking. That poem came from an exercise of the best compliment you've ever been paid. So thank you, Ewan. As time goes on, I might end up having to explain who Ken Clark is for younger audiences, but I hope people know who Ken Clark is. And I'm going to read an allotment poem, which I don't think needs any explanation, hopefully, except to say it is, it's dedicated to Tina, who was our allotment neighbour for a long time and died a couple of years ago, and was absolutely a force of nature. She wasn't actually that old when she died. She looked a lot older because she'd had a very hard life. So thank you, Tina. This is what happens after you die. People descend from all along the southwest quadrant to take your stash of chicken wire, to roll your shed over and over to where it will one day be a composting toilet for everyone's benefit, to take cuttings of your smoke purple, regal purple sage. They dig up your hyacinths while they're deep in municipal flower. The grass keeps growing. The strongest weeds are abundant, rising over and through all the shit that would one day come in useful, jerry cans, pallets, evening primrose, fool's parsley, fennel. Last year's manure hummock slumps gently lower, grassed over. The wheelie bin you persuaded someone to drag down for you, servile in the wake of your motorized chair and yapping circle of little dogs, lies agape and sly in the undergrowth like a crocodile. It watches with one eye when they come in high summer through the tiger tail grass plumes, looking for blackberries, spying the sleeping dragon nest of spiny stems in the far corner. They're risking their ankles, wading through meadow, stepping on God only knows what that gives and cracks underfoot. Rats undoubtedly live here. Bryony and vetch wrestle upwards. The blackberries are tar and honey. You can't tell beforehand which ones will be sweet. You have to chance it. It's funny with poems how you have the echo of previous drafts in your head. And the first draft of this ended in very much in Tina's voice saying "fuck 'em." But I was persuaded by wise voices. This is before it even got to you, Jane, I think, that I should step off lightly. But I always hear Tina saying "fuck 'em" in the back of my mind when I read it. And I'm going to read my Blade Runner poem, which was accepted for Under the Radar quite a few years ago, which I think was my first proper contact with 9 Arches. So I wanted to read it for that reason. And I'm glad that Daryl Hannah's Inner Thighs got a mention in Jane's introduction, so they'll appear again now. And if you haven't watched Blade Runner, you really should. It's amazing. But the title is a refrain that kind of comes up through the film. Wake up, time to die. It's supposed to be digitally remastered, but it's pixelated to shit still. Luscious city smog, rain, light blare like morning mist. The year my father knew he was dying, every film turned out to be about death. Blade Runner the worst, built-in obsolescence and a 4-year lifespan in the near-distant future of 2019. I must have watched it yearly since, and every time Harrison Ford gets younger. I don't remember whether Dad liked it, but every time Rutger Hauer dies for our sins, too perfect to imagine, I think of watching it with him. The oxygen tank, the tipping chair the NHS lent him, and how that year he was too ill for his lifetime trip to India, so watched TV all day. I don't care if Deckard is a replicant or not. I just hope he makes it to the mountains. This evening, I am grateful to watch yet another director's cut, to wonder at Pris, your standard pleasure model, Daryl Hannah's tender, immortal quarter-century inner thighs, self-sustaining miracles. I am grateful that you are here again to snicker with me when Deckard fails again to persuade anyone that he's still quit, to toast life as it is, and still being part of it. And my penultimate poem is the trifle poem, which I was kind of thinking, oh, how do I have the energy for the trifle poem? But having had it mentioned in the intro, I'm psyched myself up for it. So it came from a dinner party conversation. You know, have you had these conversations about your desert island choices, the book you would have, the music. So we were saying, if you could only have one food to live on forever after on your desert island, what would it be? So of course I said trifle. And the poem has a little epigraph from Nigella Lawson's proper English trifle recipe from How to Eat, which is, a degree of vulgarity is requisite. And I would say it's kind of a midlife crisis type poem. Trifle. Oh, take it as a sign that you've got too comfortable. If you find yourself in the middle of your life leaning back over your dinner party after dinner cognac, no one you know anymore a smoker, and conversation idly cycles through your desert island choices and everyone's being unbearably hypothetically sensible. Fuck this for a game of zombies. Take it as a sign that now's the time to smash the bottle and set fire to what, after all, is simply ethanol, fuel you've cultivated a taste for in order to pass as civilized in society. Burn the house down and go out raging, finding yourself astray in a wood of branching paths, declaring with a passion incomprehensible to these people your allegiance in shipwrecked extremists to sherry-soaked sponge, glutinous fruits, cream, to inadvisable, heart-stopping, lifeboat-full quantities of brain-numbing fucking custard. Definitely a trifle fan. So I'm going to end with the last poem in the book, having started with the first one, and just thank you again to the wonderful Nine Arches family, to Jane and to Tanya and to Jessica. It is lovely to be here, and thank you to everybody watching on YouTube. A lot of people I know have said they're going to be there, and this book is made from a lot of conversations and a lot of help from a lot of brilliant poets. So thank you all. Night Heart. You're late. I glum in the dim, home on my own, night rain on the roof. You're later. I fume and feed my sulk's fire with little broken sticks of your thoughtlessness. Hours go on, and my unanswered texts get less brusque more hysteric. I get littler in this big bed. My sulk goes out, and all I've got is the drip and plop of my heart like the rain on the glass, heart like a dolorous frog out in the mud, fat glob of meat singing a croak, calling its love, or calling some big-beaked fate to spear it out. One of these nights it'll happen, one of us dead. Come home, drunkard, pleased with yourself till tomorrow's bad head. Come home safe, come home love.
A huge thank you, Ramona, for those wonderful, wonderful poems and for that great reading. They are so tender and enriching and joyous, and they toast life as it is, as the poem says. And now we go from trifle, a shipwreck in extremis, to our next reader, Jessica Mukherjee, to tell you a little bit about Jessica. Jessica Mukherjee lives in Kent. Her work appears in many journals, including Agenda, Poetry Wales, The North, Rialto, Under the Radar, Poetry Birmingham Literary Journal, and in various anthologies, including Blood Axe's recent Staying Human anthology. She was highly commended for the 2017 and 2021 Forward Prizes for Best Single Poem, and author of 2 previous full collections, Flood from Cultured Llama and Tigress from Nine Arches Press, the latter of which was shortlisted for the Ledbury Month Prize for the Best Second Collection in 2021. And Jessica is joint editor of Against the Grain Poetry Press. Jessica's third collection really traces a journey through maritime myth. And it has this wonderful, wonderful cover here as well by Jason DeCaires Taylor, his gorgeous artwork. That journey through maritime myth brings the past and the present together, the histories of colonialism, migration, borders and upheaval. And she focuses her long glass on all of the subjects that come out of these various journeys and travels. These are poems that ask us to think about what it means to move across the black water of oceans, to seek safe harbours, whether in refuge, exile or escape, and what the notion of land, place and belonging, as much as the sea, means to us in our fractious age of climate change and conflict. And amongst all of this, here is Bowie in theatrical guise, prime ministers as terrible and unworthy captains spouting Latin, John Clare as a poetry father figure, post-Brexit realities, South Walian and Bengali landscapes, small acts of magic, transformation and rescue amongst the sea shanties. Jessica's poetry is an astonishing mix, salt fresh language, longing in lyrical memory, the music of all the multifarious things that make us, that define us. And in disquieting style, Jessica finds the sense of belonging we seek for. Will you please welcome Jessica Mukherjee.
Wow. Do I speak now? Gosh, thank you so much. I won't go all Gwyneth Paltrow now, and because I'll be here all night thanking you, Jane, probably. And it's an honour for me to be here. And thank you very much for that amazing introduction. And thank you, Ramona and Tanya. I managed to hold it together in terms of, here it is. Notes from a Shipwreck. We go whaling in the violent blue, and the crew are lit by sperm oil, perfumed by ambergris. Our Nantucket night birds sing a parliament of beer-filled chants. We wonder if the tales of monsters are real, details charted. We tie the stove up in red tape so it doesn't kill us. The captain asks me to cook Bengali fish and pray to a Hindu sea god, Varuna, god of rain. Lightning strikes us. I thought he knew where we were going. Salus populi, he blusters in Latin. Says he thinks he's packed enough limes and lemons. I must stink wearing this foul plastic. Her fluke takes us down for the whole catastrophe of things we did to her and the sea. I was just a ship-trapped girl on a rock, far from homeland. It was nothing to do with me, just a bloody foreigner. I watch as they harpoon her. We wipe our sleeves while the wreckers look on, light fires on the shore. What a disaster the stink is for all the sailors left. Next comes scurvy. Next comes fever. The captain brings us a remedy named after a baby whale who washed up on the banks of the Thames near Barnes Bridge last summer. I stood by when the crowds came to witness her carcass. And the next poem, a poem I never get tired of reading. This is a poem that I wrote for Jane for Under the Radar. And it's about young love and the performative nature of young love, but also the dangers. This is called Cracked Actors. That summer, I became Puck, Miranda, Titania. You turned Romeo, Ferdinand, Antonio. Let's run away, you said. Peter Pan the fuck out of here. You stole your dad's Vauxhall Cavalier. I stole my dad's checkbook. And we drank as you drove down the motorway. I was in love with Bowie. And you were amused and jealous as I sang along to Diamond Dogs. Sweet thing, 5 years. You said I was beautiful. So I shaved off my eyebrows and spiked up my hair and Cupid blind. I knew you were desperate. I stood on the hotel room's bed with fishnets, a fake fur jacket, painted lips of dust ruby to take you. In the mirror, we melted together, show reel slow. Is it hunky-dory? I wanted to know. The tape recorder we bought on the way played Lady Stardust. We acted like movie stars. Nothing was safe. You were slicked back. I waxed and waned, made up from a strange thing of you. Someone clapped. Did we make it from the bones and blood of us, all smeared like lipstick on the sheets as we fell to earth? I was a vixen when I was back at school. You, Oberon, had a line or two to get through. I was playing kitchen sinks and gin until you were out of my system. The next poem is, it's really about being a kid and being foreign, actually, to a certain extent, because when I was a child, I was always a bit embarrassed that my mum ate with her hands. And it starts with our Ayurvedic chant about why we eat with hands and how actually it's very good for us. Eating with hands. Through the thumbs comes space, through the forefinger comes air, through the mid finger comes fire, through the ring finger comes water, through the little finger comes earth. The knives and forks are gossiping about us as we silently put them in places out of harm's way. They notice the tiger and its too big grin barge in, know that it'll devour everything. So they sigh, lie flat and dry, and untouched by us in their sharp and shiny way, because the tiger's teeth are masters of severing. It prowls cupboards, goes through the bread bin, the fridge, barely glancing, placing weight where we put the meanings of our rhymes, where we empty vast slop buckets as it pisses and catches its hair in every sharp corner with daily duties. They clatter and clink about us, say that man can't rouse his wife or give those kids proper advice, just fights and bickers, pulls each implement out and argues about how to wash and sharpen them. They say the tiger doesn't need them. Knives and forks are cowards, and like the teacups, fragile, held trembling between her fangs. Always like a tiger in my poems. And this is about when your muse comes to visit you, or God, or Bowie, or whoever your muse is. When God visits me, he's covered in glitter. Slippery, quiet in his mime costume, with little to tell me, pretends to cry at my sad fall downs, does the trapped in a box thing with his hands, pulls on an invisible rope, hangs his head, sometimes Prospero, sometimes Miranda, sometimes Ariel. Can't always tell if he tries to scare or soothe as prayers are answered in cryptic clues and dance moves. Whimsical. He turns up as a woman clothed in glistening fish, a bowerbird or sharp-suited magpie, whatever the mood, tells me things in shrieks and spears a word or two my way, cut up from magazines. He did fall to earth in my dream once, dressed as a blue jay, with a wide-brimmed hat, told me secrets. But I suspect he tells everyone, says Satori is the answer. I know it's a trick to keep me listening. And this poem, I don't think any poem, any book about shipwrecks is complete without something about the bottom of the sea. So I wanted to read this poem. It's in 5 parts, and as a little homage to Ramona and to Tanya, because there's an octopus in it. 1. Oh, it's called Davy Jones's Locker. 1. What is this stuff? Sediments of flesh at the bottom of the ocean. It takes time to decay. Her insides expand with gas. She floats like a ship boarded by seabirds, seducing sharks. And all the sky gods look on, lick their lips. 2. I avoid Jonah, who follows me about the ship. I study my books. The skipper says that drowning's the worst death, like a million elephants sitting on your chest. He knows because he fell into a pond when he was 6. 3. A giant octopus asks, what are books? Hindu goddess with all those arms appears at the port side, brains in her fingertips. Feels my pulse, pulls me down, full fathoms 5. I can't swim. I was ashamed when they fished me out, gasping for breath. 4. Lanternfish, black smelt, and hagfish live on the dead whale. A body grows in all the blood oil with a sticky arm snags. Food that glues to skin turns to shell there. I saw her. There's nothing but honesty down there. 5. Beached, fed on a reef of shipwrecked wood. There's an art to being washed up. I share snippets of songs, the odd tall tale, my glass eye, false teeth, vertebrae. There are 2 tons of carbon flux. No story goes to waste. And I wanted to also appreciate that Ramona and Tanya wrote about complicated love. And this is a complicated love poem in a way to my father, who certainly doesn't like Father's Day cards. This is called Father's Day. My father, torn sofa, worn cushions piled high, didn't teach me to swim when I was a child. Me accusing over breakfast, that day the world was hot. You made my life harder. Some children cry for their mothers. At that poolside, his own head submerged again, remembering dusk in a Bengal pond. He was only reaching for dragonflies, as boys do, falling under. He was always talking about those ponds. He took me crying to a library, safety in silence, hope laid out in front of me, a magician's set of books, stay safe on an island or stacked on shelves. And later we watched those fantasy films with gorgons, hydras and harpies. Look, he said, look what creatures are in the world. I yelled, it's camera tricks, proud to dispel his myths. And we laughed. Last month, he began to cook again for his bedridden wife, like he did 30 years ago. That time she was taken to hospital, her voices threatening to poison us. Last month, on a cursory visit on my sister's insistence, I noticed he hadn't cleaned the house. It's an illusion, he told me. I won't bother, because the dirt always returns. Reading the Upanishads, he sits in his priority seat in the living room, the only place where you can see the TV, where he ignores the world, even though he wants to live to see it drown and watch all the creatures sink into the earth. And today, it's Father's Day. And I've sent no card to say thank you for what you did and what you didn't do. And here's my Brexit poem. It's called No Place Like Home. No place like home. She didn't want Angela Merkel to take our queen. She kept saying it over and over, that little woman from the village, clicking ruby slippers while I grumbled about petrol prices. She must have thought me stuck up, though nice enough to pass the time of day before the post office shut. I drive in the pouring rain until I get to the coast, and would have driven to the sea if I'd not run out of petrol. Wolf clouds mock me, tell me I've nothing here, no children, a failure, some kind of aberration. This is the wrong country. I'd worn the wrong shoes. My father said, I've the wrong man living in my house, the wrong head, the wrong country, the wrong world, the wrong shoulders. I went out on my own last night to a Korean restaurant, ordered the wrong thing again, and everyone else's was better. There's a German word for that, I'm sure. I was given silver chopsticks by a girl with great hair. I felt like crying. My sister phones and speaks to me like a stranger about our father. I want to tell her to see a shrink and hang up. I say things will be fine. There's nonsense on the radio as I drive home. Later, I watch a documentary about the Inuit and how they've lost their rights to hunt whales, and the ice is evaporating. For some people, there's no place like home. And I'm going to finish with a woman who survived the Titanic, and they made a musical about her. And so this is my homage to her and all those who survive shipwrecks. The Unreliable Memoirs of the Unsinkable Molly Brown. I met a deep sea diver with a fear of water who held secrets. She knew I couldn't swim, said, start small, take a hot bath, feel your body expand, lose its shape. These are the first steps to bravery. I met a Swedish girl who held me in her generous hands on the rocks in Stegkusten while I was slippery-footed and unsure, and we swam together in a whirlwind she found for me. I met a boy I loved with a broad back. He knew I had a fear of drowning. He took me to Berlin to swim in the Liquidrom and the Badeschiff. You can't sink, he told me as I climbed on board. I'd no idea how I met the ice-cold sea, through gaps and blanks of the seeping crept, and no time to think or read the papers. I was so prepared, no time for graphs or PowerPoint. It's amazing what you can muster when you are terrified. I met my body, all brined and salted, made of icebergs and disaster. Thank you. And thank you, Jane, for publishing my poems.
Oh, Jess, thank you so much for that wonderful reading, those poems that are by turns slippery and tempestuous and transformative. It's been such a joy to hear you read from your brand new book, published tomorrow, Notes from a Shipwreck. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to all of this evening's readers. I'm going to invite them all to join us in the gallery now. So hopefully everyone watching us on YouTube can see all of our poets who have joined us this evening. It's been such a delight, and the connections between your poems have been really interesting as well. The readings, revelatory, richly rewarding, distinctive. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy and really interesting to see the connections between shipwrecks, octopuses, plenty of ideas of the sort of ways that we seek and feel belonging, or seek and feel understanding of ourselves, how we kind of satisfy appetites, all of these different things about the kind of connection as well between body and mind. It's really interesting thinking just about your poem about eating with hands, and Ramona, how those poems really tap into hunger of various different kinds and what it means to satiate ourselves or seek a sort of sense of fulfillment from things. And Tanya, also how your poems sort of think about the mind and body and experiences of being alive in different bodies, whether they're octopuses or human bodies in various ways. So an absolute delight. Thank you so much for your reading. I just want to say also a very big thank you to our wonderful audience who've been watching at home on YouTube. And we've got some amazing comments. Thank you to everybody. Strong and striking, terrific readings, brilliant, compelling sets, amazing imagery, 3 absolutely wonderful readings. Thank you so much. Joyous, powerful, crackling. I feel that's a really, really good summary of the beautiful poetry we've heard tonight from our 3 writers. Just to remind you that those books are available as a special book bundle from the Nine Arches Press shop. If you would like to buy them, they're on there. It's the best way to support poets and support poetry is buy directly from us. Also to let you know that we do have an in-person event coming up on the 24th of October at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, where Dean Atta and Jane Byrne will be performing together at our wordplay event in October. So details are on our Eventbrite, and as well we will continue obviously to do these online events also, and we've got a long-term commitment to those, so we will hopefully see you again in the autumn with our next online event. It only remains really for me to thank our wonderful audience. Thank you for joining us. My wonderful colleague Angela Hicken, who's behind the scenes here at Nine Arches, making sure that this event all runs well and has been looking after you all on YouTube as well. Thank you, Angela. And finally, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Jess. We're going to do a Zoom wave and bid you all adieu. Thank you, everybody. Good night.